Hello and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, Editor-in-Chief, and today we're diving into emergency response plans and how restoration companies can set themselves apart in the industry. I'm excited to be joined by Jeff Carrier, a restoration industry expert with 15 years of experience, and he specializes in sales and marketing strategies. Jeff is the founder of Restoration ERP, which was founded in 2020. Where, where he helps restoration companies boost commercial sales and differentiate themselves in local markets. He has a degree in marketing, and Jeff has developed advanced sales strategies and managed in-house marketing teams. Jeff frequently speaks at conferences, teaching restoration companies how to implement disaster preparedness programs and increase commercial sales. His philosophy is focused on a value-added approach to sales and focuses on strategies that drive growth while providing significant benefits to their clients. Please welcome Jeff Carrier.
Thanks for having me, Kayla. Excited to be here and talk some more restoration and commercial sales with you.
I am too. I think this is a great topic and how they all intertwine, right? Sometimes people think of things separately, and that's not necessarily the case. So, I know we're going to talk about a variety of things today, but I just wanted to know, what made you start your company?
Yeah, no, that's actually a really great question. So when I was working in-house doing sales and marketing, I was managing all facets of the marketing and sales team. And that included online marketing, that included salespeople and commercial account managers. And so I learned a lot and brought a lot from my in-house sales that I worked in Boston when I was going after Fortune 500 companies. And I eventually started helping out organizations doing digital marketing when I kind of started stepping away from the in-house marketing stuff. And one thing I kept on hearing over and over again, it's like, hey, it's great. We're coming up. We're getting, residential calls, but how do I get commercial? Like, how do I get commercial work? And this is one of the things that I kind of spearheaded and had, I did myself at the restoration company and then managed others, which was, well, we got to go in there with the value proposition for these property managers, these facility managers. We have to show value up front. We have to help them with their business. And that really stems a lot from setting up disaster preparedness plans for them. And when you're working with facility managers, they're short on time. You need to be assisting them. So it worked really well, and it was a process that and a sales strategy that had been around for a very long time, right? A lot of the national guys have been doing it for a while. So there was a lot of information out there to learn from and execute locally. And then when I started speaking to all of these owners that I was working with, I said, well, surely there's a platform to help you do that now online and brand it as yourself. And so that way it's just easier because it was always done in paper and binder. That's how I had to do it, right? The hard way.
Yeah.
Um, and so there wasn't, and I had heard of a couple other tools that were either uber expensive or not user friendly. So it really just is one of those market ideas that I was very familiar with, already plugged into the industry. So I said, well, let me see if I could do a small MVP, a minimal viable product, so that way I could sell it to some local agency people, restoration companies, and that's where it blossomed from. It's like, well, what does a restoration company need? Well, they want to equip their sales staff with something that is easy to use, that is also a differentiator, but also is them. So that way, when they're walking into a commercial building or a hotel, they say, hey, we can help you do this with our product. And those were the two things that I set out to do, is make sure it was really affordable and make sure it was branded as the restoration company. And then I just set forth to kind of building it from there.
Yeah, I would definitely say, I think branding is extremely important too, right? So that you're constantly showing who you are. And it's nice for it to look like you as a company. So I think that definitely sets your guys' stuff apart because, at the end of the day, it's your representation and you don't want somebody to get something and say, who is this? And it's not their company or vice versa. So with that, I think this loops into how restoration companies can actually differentiate themselves in a competitive market. I think you kind of dove into that, but how does having their ERP set and their sales set help them in a competitive market? What else can they do, or how do they utilize these two things to do that?
Mhm. Yeah. walking into a commercial facility these days and for a very long time is definitely different than walking into insurance agencies. Again, going back to if you look at kind of a behavioral sales approach with these types of people, is that they're very business focused, they're short on time, they're looking for you to help solve problems for them. Not only that, though, they have a history of working with similar type companies. Now, we all know in the industry in our local markets, like, hey, we do a really good job. This company we hear horror stories about through adjusters and so on and so forth. But from a facility manager perspective, unfortunately, they're like, hey, you guys suck up water. You guys suck up water. It's hard for them to differentiate it, unfortunately, especially when you're walking in and you're saying, hey, we do water cleanup, we do mold, we do fire, we're local, we've been around for X amount of years. Well, these are the same things that every person in your market is saying. So how is the property manager supposed to differentiate that? And so if you come in and you have a tool or an offering of sorts, and you're able to speak to their pain points. One of the things that we talk a lot about is, hey, find out what their pain points are in the preparedness and disaster response, and what can we offer as solutions to that to help differentiate ourselves. So now the conversation is flipped from, hey, I'm Jeff from ABC Restoration. Again, we do fire, water, we've been around, to something more than the effect of, hey, we work with other property managers such as yourself, such as, the Hilton down the street, and so on and so forth. We help them with recovery time, minimizing disruption, lowering restoration costs, priority response, communication and legality issues. Are any of those been issues in the past for you? Now we're having a much more intelligent and professional kind of sales approach and conversation. And then on
Yeah.
the back end of that, once we start getting their interest and intrigue, which is, well, yeah, of course I've had some issues. It's never fun dealing with this experience and damage and unhappy tenants and clients. How do you help me with that? Then you can kind of launch into the next step, which is great. I'd love to tell you more about our program that's designed to help you guys at no cost when I have time. And that's kind of like the, very quick, but like that whole approach, communication, and then what we're going to offer on the back end of our ERP program is going to be very different than XYZ person who's not offering plan. It's not online. It's, the solutions aren't the same. And so that I think those are a few easy ways that a commercial salesperson can differentiate themselves.
I was definitely going to say it's an easy way to customize specifically towards that customer. You don't necessarily have to have specifics, but when you're asking them those questions as a consumer, you feel like it's definitely tailored towards you specifically. And so you
Mhm.
you stop and take a second and say like, okay, they're really trying to help me personally, not they're not trying to apply the one approach fits all. And I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great point because one of the things that, and I think was even one of your questions was, what are maybe some of the challenges or, of selling this? And if you do come in with an approach of, well, I'm just going to say that we have, one or two, three things like priority response and, we do a walkthrough and that's your whole pitch. Well, you're definitely, handcuffing yourself because there's a lot of other solutions that we can attach to an ERP program that hasn't been able to happen in the past because it was done on paper. And we do want to one of the terms I use is we want to curate this to the client, to your point, right? It's a hand selection process, meaning your needs and your pain points are very different from the person down the street. So let me understand what that is. Use a consultative sales approach. And then just like any good lawyer, whatever they're saying, we have a really good solution on the back end, right? And there's a lot of different things that we can offer that you just haven't had to do in the past or maybe haven't thought of. And it could be everything from adding in 3D scans to their plan to adding in inspection reports and documentation and expiry notifications. It could be to, assisting their sales staff by having equipment on site so that way we're lowering restoration costs and they can also utilize their in-house staff, which is a really big objection that people come up to and they don't know how to sometimes work through it. But there's some really cool creative ones that we can. And so those are all different solutions depending on the client, and we can curate this plan around them. And then they definitely feel like it's customizable and it's helpful for them most importantly.
Yeah, I would definitely say that those are the key things, right? Customizable, helpful. I guess too, I would definitely say like interactive. They're not just kind of getting something and like you said on paper, and then you
Mhm.
dread it because you see this thick mound of paper and you're like, oh, I have to go through that. It's a lot more user friendly when it's something that's digital and interactive. So, you know, how does one start to implement something like this? I know you've probably put so much time and effort to all of this, but for our restoration folks out there that are, interested in doing something like this, what types of steps do they need to take to not only implement it, but do it efficiently and effectively?
Yeah. And that's a really good question. I think that's probably arguably like maybe the most important kind of question that everyone needs to ask themselves because once we're on a call and we're on a demo, I want to understand what your sales strategy is and how you're going to actually help support your sales staff and what the process of executing this program is going to be. Because if you think this is just like any other software, I'm sure you can't just purchase it, give it to your salesperson, and go tell them to, sell disaster plans. There's got to be a level of strategy and support there. So, for first off, we want to get a good understanding of what our target audience and market is that we're going to go after. Get that list curated and ready to go. We want to get supporting documentation for the program, as in if someone's just walking in talking about a plan, but there's no online pages and website to support it, they don't have great leave behinds, they don't have ERP reports as examples. If we're not equipping the salespeople with some cool, good visual material to assist in getting that meeting, that's going to hurt them. Um, and then we want to be able to have the proper sales cadence put in place so that way they're consistent with their approach and professional. So they're managing a pipeline. And and then after that, we want to understand all of the offerings that we can offer. So you might not have a 3D scanner, so we can't have that as part of the plan. You might have the ability to do indoor air quality tests, and now you can actually add that in as part of your plan. So I think it's really important to really get a list of everything that you can offer. Can you offer priority response? Can you offer equipment staging if the client is right? Can you offer assistance on just moisture mapping and documentation for drying if they want to use their internal staff? These are all small little tidbits that is part of our solutions. And that way, when the salesperson goes out, they can ask as many pain point questions as possible, knowing that they have that solution on the back end, which is really, really important. Um, Having all of that in place and just kind of following that procedure is really going to help them with the implementation and execution of this plan program. And then once you've done that, you want to make sure that you've integrated that into the company's workflow, meaning the salesperson's out there, they've executed some plans, they've got agreements, they got walkthroughs, they got data uploaded to their disaster ERP, restoration ERP platform. Now, if someone calls in, what does that process look like? Does a front office person know that you guys have an ERP plan? We want to give them the sense of confidence as soon as someone says, hey, this is the Hilton Hotels. We've got an ERP plan for you. Here's where the issue is. Say, no problem. We'll look up your plan online. We'll send up the necessary people. That type of stuff goes a long way, and that just needs to be communicated. The same thing with the ops managers and the mitigation team. Everyone needs to be kind of on the same team of what sales is doing, so that way it gets supported on the back end. What kind of special things are we doing for this client that we might not be doing for someone else because they've given us a level of commitment that other people have not. And that level of commitment, of course, is very important, especially in commercial, because there is a much more of a kind of recurring revenue, which is why it's really attractive for a lot of people. And so those are a lot of the steps that I would focus on. And you kind of get the idea, like it's not just about throwing someone out and, um, out there and just letting them see what happens. You really want to have this written out, just like you would with, anything else when you're executing a job on site.
Yeah, and I would definitely say with it being an ERP and one of the words being preparedness, like, just being prepared, you have to prepare before you hand that off,
Yeah.
right? You don't want to just throw somebody in
Yeah.
there and just say like, "Hey, see if this works," right? So I know you talked about
Yeah.
almost like a checklist style, right, of stuff that you have to have. There's some really cool things like shut off, like utility shutoffs, right? And like notification of documents expiring. So how does that help,
Mhm.
day-to-day operations? It's a positive impact, I would definitely say. And so how does that affect stuff like day-to-day operations?
Yeah, if the facility is, fully utilizing this, which is, it scales, or, it varies depending on the type of person and or facility themselves. But of course, you can imagine where having their entire property and building documented can help them do a lot of different things when it comes to accessing the information, editing and keeping it up to date if things were to change, which is really helpful for also just training and onboarding their own employees. There's a lot of turnover in the multifamily and property management world. So, how do they train new people? How do they keep certain assets up to date so that way they don't run into insurance issues? So, if you're having your inspection reports done correctly, you can get notified and make sure that their team is keeping that up to date. You also have the ability where their staff, who's not regularly communicating or working with all the vendors, can easily access and see all the proper documentation for those vendors. Either they're up to date, making sure they're calling the right person, especially if there's third shift security overnight people. Do they know the right people to call? We recently added something which was an emergency communication tree. So who's supposed to be calling who in the event of an emergency? And when you have emergencies, of course, they're going to happen, and people could be, on site, off site, on vacation. So, where are those procedures located? So now we can easily access those procedures and follow them. They're put in place for a reason, but if we can't access them for whatever reason, if we don't know where they're located, then the organization might not be as efficient in their response and their recovery because they're not following the procedures. And the same goes for the restoration companies when their response is, which is there's a lot of times there are access areas that they know that they need information for how to
Mhm.
access, either through be log boxes or access codes and certain people they need to call. We used to work at the casino, so there's a certain check-in process as well that needs to be done. If none of this is set up in advance, then your response and recovery is dramatically slowed, and then your costs increase, and then your disruption is higher. Your satisfaction with customers and personnel is higher. So there's definitely a snowball effect there as well. Um, so there's a lot of day-to-day ops, and then even just for documentation purposes, being prepared for insurance. So if you have 3D scans and having your content list inventory, if you have a major disaster, you can go back and kind of get a snapshot into history of what was located at the building, and or for your projects. You have the ability to upload photos and notes and the history of all the water damage and losses that happened at the property, what was the cost there, but also documentation in case someone has a claim against you. We worked with a lot of facilities where 3 months down the road they would claim that there might be a smell or an odor or an issue, and you need to have that information readily available to either submit to insurance or protect yourself legally.
I was definitely going to say that it's just like it's so interconnected, right? Everything has to be done from, preparing things to implementing to keeping records, right?
Mhm.
It all ties together. I think you touched on a great spot where you said casinos, right? There's a specific type of check-in. Well, really anywhere you go, there's a specific type of check-in, or at least there
Yeah.
should be, right?
Yeah.
And, this you're oftentimes dealing with vendors that have different protocols and what have you. So when restoration professionals are setting up their ERPs, how do they do this efficiently, effectively? So even if they are faced with maybe somebody that they don't really deal with, is there a way to maybe reference or kind of research and kind of plan that into their own situation?
Yeah, so we provide, to your point that you noted earlier in terms of a checklist, we provide like an ERP checklist to go through, in terms of type of information that we want to collect as restorers, so that way we're best prepared for the response. Doing the walkthrough itself is very helpful. And you can update that, live through our app. You can just take a photo and upload all these sections while you're going through. So there's definitely a lot of different sections that's going to assist us when it comes to staging and response and access information, priority areas, and previous damaged areas. Then there's also, so we're working as we've kind of developed over time. And when we launched in 2020, it was very heavy documentation and pre-laws, but we're continuing to move in the process where, okay, great, well, everyone is now prepared. Like, how do we efficiently manage this response? So that's where stuff like the communication tree is really important. So in the event of a disaster, now the restoration company knows their role in the communication tree and also what might need to do in that process as well. So there's a lot of different, especially if you're working with a large organization, they have multiple buildings. One of our clients recently told us how they were communicating with the wrong person at a specific building. Well, we can
Mhm.
upload contacts that is tied to a specific property. So if we're working inside of a property, we got the floor plans, we got the shutoffs, we got the access and staging, and now we have the correct personnel we need to be updating because communication is just gigantic in these events. And so all of those things can be streamlined and readily accessible to a restorer as they're gearing up, the equipment and in response to the location.
Yeah, that's helpful too. And I think, you just said it, you can just update instead of, waiting for somebody to say, oh, we'll put it in the system or, oh, hey, we'll send it to you or what have you. Because we know, right? Uh, things can take a
Yeah.
minute when you're busy.
Yeah, and one of the big things with having disaster ERP plans is even if you're running into someone that says they have a disaster plan, right? You need to sit back and understand what that objection means because there's a lot to that. And one of the big things that we found is, yeah, they've gone through the time and put procedures together, and they've got a call list, and they've got their floor plans, and it's an 150-page PDF, which is just unusable in the event of an emergency.
Yeah.
Well, with our plan and having something online, it's editable on a per line item basis. So if this person no longer exists in the building, we click delete. If we need to add one person to the communication tree, we can just click one button and add that one person to the communication tree. If something in agreement is expired and we get notified, we can just edit, update that one line item, and now that's up to date again. And the same goes for staging access codes. We can just edit that access code. We don't need to update all the parties involved. Once we go to the plan and go to the building and we go to the mechanical room or back access, it's the code there is just the updated code. So we're updating the plan in real time and it's dynamic.
I was gonna say that's actually one of those things too. It's like in real time, sometimes stuff takes, oh, at midnight it'll update or what have you. So when you're in that response mode and time is of the essence, it's important that stuff is instantaneous like that. And I also think too, it as a restorer and you're working with all these other vendors, it allows you to know that there's opportunities to remind people. Sometimes people forget, even though you're working with them and it's part of a plan, you can say like, oh, hey, I need this, or hey, I can't do anything until you help me with this. And so I think communication at the end of the day is extremely important. But if you have a well-established ERP, you're going to be able to say, hey, I can't help you, or hey, can you do this? And sometimes it's new to people too. Let's be real. If we're doing this on a regular basis, the people we're helping not necessarily have dealt with it numerous times, right?
Yeah, they're as new to this as surprisingly as really anyone, even though you feel like they should have a plan in place. That's not really like an objection that, our clients and restorers really run into. There's much more when it comes to making sure it's a priority and collecting the info. But like their experience is really relied on the restorer. They're the disaster response experts. So, we do a training course and we actually advise everyone to change their title from something that sounds super salesy to a disaster preparedness advisor, because that's your job, right? We're coming out here, we're going to help you be prepared for a disaster. There's no cost associated to this. This is what our company is doing in the communities. We're assisting all local commercial facilities in being better prepared for a disaster. And that's my role with it too. And, to that point as well, as I actually had a talk last year in front of IFMA facility managers and
Mm-hmm.
got invited to their conference next year to speak again. And which is really fortunate. But one of the things, the key takeaways was, which is super unique, because usually I'm in front of restorers, this time I'm in front of facility managers.
Yeah.
And speaking with them afterwards, one of the things that a few of them would ask me is, so is it real that, this company, these types of companies will come out and document my building for me and walk through at no cost? They're not even aware that this is a thing.
Yeah.
Um, So there's just such huge opportunity if presented correctly, and well in a value added approach like we've discussed, where that seems like obviously there's a win-win scenario. The restoration company is looking for the commitment, and here's how we're going to help you be better prepared, and then the facility managers really get a lot of value out of this. And to end with, not only that, there's a lot of insurance requirements. So a lot of them are mandated to submit
Yep.
something. So if you go
Mhm.
in there, you upload all this information, you click email report, boom, their job is done. Every school system in every state has a state code that you can look up, and you can walk in to their facility and say, hey, how are you guys, abiding by and executing the state code 5031.CB? That's your disaster preparedness. You need to submit that every year. How are you guys doing that? We can
Yeah.
help you.
Yeah, I think that you're touching on a great point. So I actually went to school for emergency management and public safety. So this one is a little near and dear to my heart because one of the gaps that I've seen in this industry is emergency response plans, just period. Whether it's
Period.
for our restorers themselves or those that they're helping, there is a big gap. And I oftentimes think about people who are going from, like, let's say they're coming from Midwest going to Florida to help for the hurricanes, right?
Mhm.
They have no idea what regulations are in place most of the time. And
Yeah.
if they're planning on doing something like that, something like this would be key for them, right? Because they can adapt, plan, all of that. And then when they do get their boots on the ground, they're handling it the right way. Because you can get in trouble, right? I think that's another thing with disasters. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble, and not just
Yeah.
you as a person, but your company. And I think this is a great way to set your, not just your company up for success, but the people that you're helping, right? The companies you're helping, especially, you talking about IFMA, that's huge because we actually do have some crossover there, right? I've attended that show and it's a great show. I attended that years ago and I didn't really realize how much we actually worked together until I attended it. And so that's great to hear, what you just took away with that. They don't know stuff like this
They
exists.
don't. Yeah. And they need help and assistance, and so like I think that's some of the confidence that a lot of restorers can walk into these facilities with and have that understanding.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool to see too, like this is completely customizable, right? So if you're in a federal building or
Mhm.
you're in a state building or a county building, they may have different rules too, right? And you can kind of tailor your plan around that, which is huge. Like I said, not one size, not one approach fits all. And
Mhm.
how does that look in a platform like yours, right? Let's say somebody is handling schools and they're handling maybe a federal building. Are they able to move things around? Like, can you explain that a little bit? Have separate plans? Can you explain that for me?
Yeah, so you're going to have, all your information typically tied at the top level organization, and then you can attach as many buildings, as you want to that organization. So if you're working with the school district, you probably have it, set up where they're the top hierarchy, and then each of their individual locations and facilities underneath that. And then on a per either building and or, organization, one school system to the next, you're going to add in the information at an organizational level and as well as the building level. And everything is kind of, it's plug and play. All of the framework is there for you. So if you want to add in information on elevators, you can. If they don't have elevators, you don't have to. Same thing goes for 3D scans. Same thing goes for the utility section. Same thing goes for every single section, right? So that's the part where you have your checklists, and then you're just speaking with the client and you get them involved in that process. What's important for you? What's not important for you? What do we need to do today? But maybe we can do this next part in 6 months. We can always come back and revisit this or keep it up to date. We don't want to be this a burden on anyone, but what's important today? Let's get a high level overview plan put in place. So that way you have something, you can print it off, you can submit it to corporate, so on and so forth. And then how can we keep providing value down the road? And that's, I think, another cool thing too with something like this, which is we can start at one level and then we can build from there. And not only that, we can get your staff involved. So if I gather all of your building lists and all of your vendors from a high level overview, because you can export that out and I can import it for you. Great. Now let's do one walkthrough at a facility and collect some straightforward information and upload this one facility for you. That's really important. Then if they have a lot of buildings, they got 500 buildings, let's do a call and show all of your other building managers on how to do a quick walkthrough in 60 minutes and upload this information. Because then we can equip them to also get involved in that process. And they go from overnight, one building being uploaded by you, where they have their building manager do a walkthrough for 60, 60, 120 minutes. And now they have 500 buildings equipped and uploaded. It's really
Yeah.
not that long. It doesn't take that much time. It would be if you had one person, but we can also leverage their team in doing so.
I was also going to say that's a really unique approach too, because it's actually tailored to them. You can walk them through it. And then if they have questions or, hey, maybe something's changed, you can
Mhm.
automatically change that. And I think you kind of touched on this when we were talking about IFMA and the role that, we as professionals play for facility managers. You know, how do we spread awareness on that? What can we do to make, it more known, like, hey, there's actually ways we can work together. This is what you can do. I think you kind of explained it a little bit already, walking everybody through, but where does somebody start? Let's say if they're new to this space, or maybe they're thinking about, hey, I've
Mhm.
established this, I want to do this. What's the best approach, you think? Just reaching out or
Yeah. So, and this is another really great question because a lot of part of executing good ERP program is just having a really good sales program in general. That's one of the things that I learned early on. And luckily, with my background with doing some high level sales in Boston, I learned, right? So, again, having a really good starting list that we can work off of, a high quality list, which you can find all over the place, either just through your Google searches, being familiar with the facility, organizations, associations that you're part of, right? Downloading their list, using scraping sites, like Apollo or Reonomy, like just grab the building information and let's get it uploaded into a CRM. Then let's set up a proper sales cadence and pipeline. Meaning, step one, I'm saying this 9 out of 10 times. Step two, I'm following up and saying this. Step three, I'm saying this and touching base. In between that, I'm sending a LinkedIn notification. Have your
yeah,
entire sales cadence built out. And then as we enter in these deals, these potential clients, we're following the same procedures. We're very consistent. Now, there's a couple other things too that you can do. So part of that process is going to be an intro call, a walk-in, an email, a combination of sorts. You're going to use some of your professional judgment. Everyone typically says, I have more success walking in. Great, we'll do that. But obviously, your time is limited. So, how can you leverage it? So, there's something else that we've added into one of our sales programs, which is you can start with email automation as well. So,
oh
something
yeah,
that's not being utilized, in this industry very much. And if you have 1,000 names, you can't target 1,000 names in the month. But what we can do is we can have a really good email sequence that's built out for 10 emails. We can run it through the program. And then as soon as we get interaction, have it alert us so that way we can kind of pick up the ball from there and we have a little bit of a warmer lead. So that's a little bit of a strategy I like to use when moving from super cold to warm for the salesperson. And they can also add in any ones that they just deem really cool and important downtown. Or if they're getting random commercial jobs, let's add that to the list. And now we have a good kind of funnel approach as well in terms of what I'm managing and then what's being fed from me from the email sequence. And I think what's important too with something like this is we got to really understand that this is a sales process in the sense that we're looking for an answer, which a lot in the restoration industry does not happen. We are like, hey, we're going to commit to this relationship forever. It takes time to build a relationship. Very, very, very much true. That's how we're going to do it. And it drives us managers and owners crazy because it's like, hey, had a great lunch. They're going to call us. Well, okay, what does that mean? How do I know
yeah.
that? How can
Where are
how
they
do,
gonna
how can I
call?
how can I confirm this, right? So I've been on that side. I've been on both sides. And salespeople should also be really mindful of their time. You don't want to call on someone for 9 months and then find out that they've been using someone else. So one of the things I love with an ERP program is let's get some form of commitment by the time we're done this presentation. And then we're walking through building the relationship. And that's also a form of commitment because they're taking their time. We're getting information, we're getting it to them. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be necessarily even a signed contract. We're seeing it nowadays where less and less of a formal agreement is put in place. But if they can agree, they can let us walk through. We can attach them to our platform. There's several steps of commitment there. And if someone doesn't go through all those steps, someone should be put off of your sales process cadence. Don't
Yeah.
call on them for 9 months. If they can't commit to you, you go in front of them, you did the pitch, move on. There's so many we can go after. And I think sometimes restoration salespeople kind of really hang on to an account for much longer than they should.
I was also going to say this goes back to like, I think everybody probably says this, or at least I know I hear it and I probably say it a lot too. There's just so much opportunity out there, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know sales are important and things like that, but there are just so many people out there who truly need your help and who actually would probably benefit from it. There's, like you said, don't carry that what you thought was a warm lead for 9 months and then it be an absolute drop, right? You could have put your
Yeah.
time and energy into something else. And with you saying, something like most of the time there should be commitment at the end of that presentation. That's refreshing to hear too, because I think oftentimes some people think that it's 5, 6, 7, 8 touches. And I know in some industries it is that many touches because, well, whatever their specialty is, it can take 5 or 6 touches. But for us, if we come into that mindset of okay, we should have 1 to 2 touches and know where we're gonna go with this, right? Imagine how much time a company gets back and also picks up other leads that they may have not picked up if they were doing the 5, 6, 7 touch method.
Yeah. And my idea is that we're moving them through a process that is hopefully at an 8 week mark. And so we're getting this answer within 8 weeks. Now it could take, several touches to get the meeting and so on and so forth. It
Yeah.
could take 8 to 10 for us to get this meeting. But once we get this meeting, hopefully within an 8 week period, then we have an idea if they're committing to us or not. Because, hey, we're providing value. We're going to give you all these things. If you're not interested in making us some form of commitment, not a problem. I'll spend my time and energy elsewhere, with hopefully a liker, better efficiency. And then going back to that email sequencing thing, you can do the same thing on the back end. So if someone says no, well, great. What are you going to do? Call on them every month like we're used to? Well, you can still have an automation process
Yeah.
where they're in a drip feed funnel coming from you once a month. It's almost like you're still marketing them. You've already gone through the sales process. You pitched them the ERP, they didn't buy, but just put them in an email sequence and you're still touching them, but you now get to refocus your efforts on newer, hopefully higher quality commitments.
Yeah, I think that's important too. A lot of times, like you're talking about automation and campaigns and drip campaigns and funnel, right? It's just some of your smaller companies, they probably don't have the resources or they're just not familiar with it, right? And
Mhm.
I have a marketing background as well. So when you're talking about, campaigns and retarget, like you could even retarget these people if you really wanted to. Um,
Yep.
the importance of having automation set up is I can't even explain it. I think it's really there's no words for it because it's so valuable, right? You can always circle back with them later too if they go through all of your campaigns.
100%.
You can have
Yeah.
another campaign that's like, hey, this person's been inactive for a year, and they may become a sale at that point. You never know.
We've seen great responses on some of these things. It's not the most efficient, but it's someone has to do it. So either you have your full-time salesperson cold calling, outreaching, prospecting, doing all these things, then managing the proper pipeline, which is really where you want them, which is setting up meetings and trying to close ERP deals and walkthroughs. Then you have the follow-up to relationship building slow, like they didn't commit to us, but we got through to them. And then you also have farming and servicing the account. So as soon as you've closed the account, you've done the ERP walkthrough, you still have to service that account so that way you get the
Yeah.
call. All four of those things can be done by one person, or you could start fragmenting that out. And now that one person is hyper focused on the sales pipeline and the engage lead. And then we have automations on the front and back end. So now that one person is now, three people or two and a half or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Clearly, they're going to be way more efficient. And there's way less drag on their most important part, the moneymaker in that sales pipeline process for the ERPs.
Yeah, and I would definitely say too, that when we're with us being on this topic, they're allowed to really hyper focus, but also their memory improves, I believe, with their interactions, right? You're going to remember your clients a little bit better. I oftentimes feel like, I mean, I think we've all been there. I used to be on the trade show floor a lot. And, when you're doing 500 things, sometimes you know the person's name, but for the life of you, you're tired and you don't, you're like, and then they walk away and you're like, okay, now I know their name. So I think that this also goes to, like you said, it's an improvement thing, right? They can focus on that pipeline, but they can also have a more humanistic approach to, I think that oftentimes people that are in sales or are in, customer service, sometimes they're wearing many hats, but when there's automation or the opportunity to bring somebody else on, you'll improve your interaction with your customers by having those separate outlets for your staff.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, hopefully, obviously, they're using a CRM to help with those conversations because there are a lot, to your point, and so you can't remember everything, and you need assistance in terms of what I need to be doing on a daily basis. What
Mhm.
was prior conversations, and like we discussed with my example with the FML, a lot of these people they don't have a plan in place, or I've kind of heard of it, so. In many ways, especially if you're starting off early on, it could be very much a low hanging fruit numbers game. Um, and there's so much opportunity in so many markets for this.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, I want to thank you for your time today. I don't have any additional questions. I think we covered a lot. So whoever watches this is going to get some great information. Do you have anything else you'd like to share before we let everybody go?
I really, really appreciate the time. Again, Kayla, the only thing I would say is if you're, I guess either a salesperson, sales manager, or owner, if you need to come with a strategy to the commercial market, and it doesn't mean that the ERPs have to be the one and only thing in a sales toolbox, but think about what your budget looks like, right? So part of your budget could be events and lunches and this and that. And I know it's just our plan. It's just a couple lunches, right? So being able to
Mhm.
walk into a facility and have something that probably no one else has in your market is a game changer. And it's just part of the budget and part of the strategy. So something to consider, and we're here to help with education and process. So I really appreciate the time and really look forward to the continued adoption and approach to the commercial sales in the restoration industry.
I do too. Thank you so much for your time, Jeff. As always, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of Ask the Expert. Bye, guys.